For 400 million years, sharks have roamed the Earth's oceans. Within the last century, humans have threatened to wipe them from existence. Today, New Age technology tempers hope for saving these great carnivores of the sea, providing scientists with valuable insight about the behavior of sharks within the marine environment. This knowledge will lead to making the waters not only safe for humans, but spare the sharks from their current state, an existence on the brink of extinction. Sharks have been called the perfect predator. For millions of years, their position at the top of the food chain has remained unchallenged. It is by human hands, however, that the sharks' command over the creatures of the sea might soon end. Since we first ventured into the shark's domain, we have perceived our relationship with these animals as a battle of survival, kill or be killed. The perception of sharks as man-eating beasts has led us to believe that we must rid the world of sharks if we are ever to be safe in our oceans. It is this perception, combined with the overfishing of these animals, that has led many species into a position where their existence is in jeopardy.
Sharks are declining at an alarming rate. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to let people know about this. I think a lot of people are unaware that sharks are under such fishing pressure and that there is such a great danger of them actually disappearing from our oceans.
The fear that mankind harbors against the great carnivores of the sea manifests itself in the public opinion that sharks are an unlimited resource.
Look, I'm not saying that sharks are in an extinction mode right now. There are really 370 different kind of sharks, and I'm sure that all of those are not going to become extinct no matter what we do. But I am saying that there are some sharks that are definitely impacted, that their populations could reach a place where they no longer have a critical mass of males and females, and then they'd crash forever. And this would be a travesty. This would be horrible.
The main source of the shark's destruction lies in the wake of international long-line fishermen, whose lines run up to 50 miles in length with as many as 4,500 baited hooks. Estimates indicate that in excess of 250 million sharks are killed each year, many at the hands of sport fishermen and floating gill nets. These nets can drift free, entrapping and killing sharks and other marine wildlife for decades.
We like to point out that sharks are important to the environment. In fact, they're vital to the ecology of the oceans. And most people think that the ocean would be a great place if it didn't have sharks. They seem to think that, wow, that's a great idea, so why are we worried about sharks?
The general public remains terrified by these animals. This fear, however, defies statistical logic. Worldwide, there are only 50 to 75 shark attacks annually, resulting in an average of less than 10 deaths. Bees, wasps, and snakes are responsible for far more fatalities each year, and the annual risk of being fatally struck by lightning is 30 times greater than that from shark attack.
What I think would be useful for the public to know is that sharks are not the death fish from hell. They're not your worst undersea nightmare, just the opposite. Sharks are as important to the marine ecosystem as lions are to the Serengeti ecosystem. They play almost exactly the same role.
Through ignorance and fear, we, as well as our governments, have allowed the harvesting of sharks to go relatively unchecked. Until very recently, there were no limits placed upon shark fishing.
And you don't have to go out and count the number of sharks there are. You can count the number of shark fishing vessels that started to try to catch them and have gone out of business, are no longer catching sharks. Why? Because the sharks aren't there.
Using their state-of-the-art riggings, modern long-line fishermen are able to catch up to 25 tons of shark in a single outing. These commercial longliners, however, are only a symptom of a worldwide problem.
And so what you have is this. You have a lot of commercial fishermen going out, buying boats, a lot of people catching this smaller and smaller pie of sharks until pretty soon there are no sharks and they go broke. Bad for the fishermen, bad for the sharks, bad for the American people who have lost their resource, and bad for the government who hasn't done their job in protecting that resource. No, it's not the commercial fishermen that's to blame here.
Asian demand for shark fin soup has skyrocketed. Fishermen sell the fins for up to $22 a pound to wholesalers like Russell Hudson of Transocean Inc.
This 2-pound set of sandbar shark fins is one shark. This box of shark fins is about 90 pounds and is worth to the fishermen approximately $2,000 and is caught in about 2 days of fishing.
Across the globe, government fisheries are shirking their responsibility to regulate the harvesting of sharks so that they may survive in sustainable numbers. Many fleets of international factory ships capture the sharks with long lines, only to cut off the shark's fins and return the lifeless carcasses back to the ocean. If the entire shark was utilized properly, this bounty could feed millions with its meat.
To fin a shark has become a morally unacceptable practice. To take a shark's fins off and to discard the remainder of the shark is considered wasteful. That type of moral mistake has to be corrected by educating both the public and the fishermen.
Luckily, not all fishermen partake in this greedy slaughter. Off the coast of Florida, a more humane method of consuming both the shark's meat and its fins creates an efficient use of this valuable resource.
The sandbar shark is the mainstay of the shark fishing industry in the southern United States. This shark needs management and monitoring to be able to ensure a long-term sustainable yield so that it will prevent overfishing.
Most shark species are at the top of the food chain with little or no natural enemies. They cleanse the oceans by feeding predominantly upon creatures that are easily captured, such as the young or the old, the sick or the wounded. Through the shark's predation, they perpetuate the reproduction of healthy animals who produce stronger offspring, which ultimately benefits the entire marine environment. If we were to rid our oceans of sharks, the delicate balance that has existed for millions of years would be destroyed.
The way a shark lives is what I like to call a slow track. Sharks are born, they grow very, very slowly, they reach maturity at a relatively late age. There's even one shark that takes 30 years before first reproduction, and then they reproduce very few offspring. Now that, combined with the position of the shark in the food chain way up on top, where it takes many, many tons of plankton to produce a few pounds of fish that sharks feed on, those two facts, their lifestyle and their position in the ecosystem, make them ridiculously prone to overexploitation.
Who really is the most dominant predator on Earth, us or the sharks? By killing over 250 million sharks a year, the answer is clear. It is not the shark, but the human race that is the most ferocious of all living creatures. On Isla Mujeres, a small island off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, the local fishermen have realized they must fish in a responsible manner in order to protect the populations of sharks off their coast. Legendary underwater cinematographer Ramon Bravo has proven to be a major factor in this successful equation through his interaction with the fishermen of Mexico. From his home in this tiny fishing village built upon the island's rugged shorelines and white sand beaches, this man has become Mexico's most respected marine life filmmaker. With more than 250 episodes of the underwater world of Ramon Bravo seen on Mexican television, Ramon has dedicated his life to educating his countrymen about the conservation of their wildest resource, the ocean. Ramon's interest in the sea began at a very young age when he first made a name for himself as a swimmer at the Helsinki Olympics. His affinity for the water led him to experimenting with early scuba equipment, and he began to photograph and write about the creatures of the sea. This hobby soon developed into his lifelong career as a documentary filmmaker, where he's delivered his message of preservation and respect for the marine environment ever since. His driving interest and concern for the shark has been a theme for many of his films throughout the years, but in 1982 his career was nearly ended by an attack.
Filmábamos aquí
Filming a movie called Blood in the Caribbean. The moment I entered the water, the shark was all over me. I felt the pool, but no pain. Luckily, my crew were filming behind the scenes. When I saw the blood in the water, I realized that I had been attacked. If the shark swam away, I immediately headed for the safety of the boat.
The perpetrator of this attack was a 10-foot bull shark, implicated by the International Shark Attack File as the third most dangerous shark in the world.
As I tried to get out of the water into the boat, my right arm collapsed. This was my first indication that I was in serious trouble. I needed help and had to be lifted from the water. Then we saw the blood, lots of it. It was streaming down my legs from under my suit. It was like a nightmare, trying to remove the binding wetsuit. And to my utter shock, I saw that the bones on my elbow joint were completely exposed. Immediately, one of my crew members applied a tourniquet. Blood was gushing from the wound. Manuel, my assistant, called ahead on the radio to the hospital, informing them that I had been attacked by a shark.
With a severed artery and losing massive amounts of blood, Ramon lapsed into shock within minutes of the attack. Upon their arrival at the dock, the ambulance rushed Ramon to the hospital.
15 minutes after the bite, I was in the operating room for 4 hours. Luckily, everything turned out fine.
Thanks to the rapid response of his crew and adept reconstruction of his severed arteries and tendons, Ramon recovered fully from this attack. Today, fishermen from all of Mexico look to Ramon to educate them about the vital role that the shark plays on the marine ecosystem. In recent years, there has been an alarming decline in the shark harvest on Isla Mujeres. Ramon explains to Pepe that marine scientists are worried because fishermen are killing approximately 250 million sharks a year. He asks him if he has noticed a change in the shark fishing here in Isla Mujeres, and if he can still fish in the same areas with the same results. Pepe replies that the local fishermen are not catching as many sharks as they once did. Where they used to fish only 5 miles from shore, now they must go as far as 10. Years ago, they could easily catch 20 sharks in a week. Now they're lucky if they catch 4 or 5 in that same amount of time. Inevitably, there are those days during the week when they dread the trip home, for they will return to their families empty-handed. Pepe is sure that the number of sharks has definitely decreased. He tells Ramon that here on the island there have been fishermen who have caught sharks with only a tail and no fins. He wonders who could do such a diabolical deed. Where do they come from? No one knows. Do they come from the Pacific? Or did the Japanese do this? Crude by modern fishing standards, the fishermen of Isla Mujeres lack the funds for today's high-tech equipment. Their lines have changed very little in a generation, and many of their boats have been passed down from father to son.
The lines we use for fishing sharks are not miles and miles long, like in other parts of the world. Instead, we fish in a more primitive manner. Our lines only have 40 to 50 hooks and are not long enough to fish deep in the ocean. Years ago, we would get many sharks in a week. Now we only get a few. That is because in other parts of the world, they fish for sharks in a more sophisticated manner, and that has affected us here in our country.
The fishermen of Isla Mujeres do not have the opportunity to benefit from mechanized winches and multi-million-dollar boats. The primitive manner in which they catch sharks may at first seem brutal, but in reality their methods are more conducive to sustaining both themselves and the populations of sharks in the area.